Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is the Astral. I'm just going through a couple of ideas, show development. So I wanted to just test out a couple of shows and really find the direction that I'm going to go in. So best way I figured to start was just to kind of go ahead and just get right to it. So I'm going to be posting a lot of shows where I'm just reviewing stuff from the news, some old cases, possibly some interviews, having some co-hosts and some roundtable discussions. So stay tuned on the channel. I just started revving it up again. I'm going to be jumping on other channels as well that I'm looking forward to this week. So just a heads up, I'm also going to be going to Contact in the Desert, which should be really fun. I went last year, so I'll talk more about that. But I did want to go through some of these UFO files that just dropped. It's wild that it was just 3 days ago that the files dropped. And this is the second. They're calling it trounce. Trounce is, I've never heard that really term before. But, you know, they're dropping it in sets. So they're kind of dropping it in specific drops where they're going to be videos and documents dropped. So 2 weeks ago, really, it's about 2.5 weeks ago, we got our first drop, which was dropped on war.gov/UFO. So if you want to go there, check out all the files. You can see the first and the second trounce that they've dropped. 3 days ago, they dropped the second one. So it looks like every couple of weeks we're going to be getting those. I just want to go through some of the files in there, some of the more interesting ones that caught my attention. And, you know, I don't know how everybody feels about the method that they're doing it. They're really not adding any context or a lot of details or information along with the evidence that they're dropping. So these files. And so the community is kind of, and really the public itself is left to fend for themselves to determine what these are. So a lot of these come with just very generic, you know, a lot of the times the only information that we're getting is in the video name itself, the file. But, you know, some of them are interesting. I think that there's a lot of different thoughts about, are these significant files being dropped? Is this just like a surface level disclosure, low hanging fruit, the easy stuff, you know, or it just to appease the public and then not really get down to, I think everybody really wants to see evidence of crash technology, alien bodies. Those are the two things that really everybody wants to see here. Have we gotten that yet? No, I don't even think we're getting anything close to that. But to have an actual place to go to view the information that our government knows about of UFOs and all of the files and reports and memos, it seems very scattered, doesn't seem very organized in how they're releasing this stuff. So this last one was really a lot of just videos. So we got over 50 videos that were dropped, which is good. I think, you know, the more videos, the better that we can try and understand like what's going on, what type of craft these are, what they could be explained as, or if they're non-human intelligence interacting in our skies. I think that's one thing that's kind of evident is once you watch these videos, there's a lot of surprise. One of the videos is pretty funny where it seems like the operator who's recording this is getting very frustrated. They've got some objects flying through their camera. They're trying to follow them. They lose them. They go back. Another one flies through. They go back. So the whole, you know, there's a threat narrative that I think you can go two ways of, are the aliens and non-human intelligences themselves a threat to humanity? That's a highly debated topic. But I think the more focused approach of disclosure recently has been not having control of our skies in terms of the US, us not knowing and being in total control of our skies is a threat in itself. And so I think that's a direction and kind of like a track that UFO disclosure seems to be lashing onto. And it's pretty evident in some of these clips that we just don't know and we don't have full control on being able to even monitor this stuff of what's going on. So, all right, let's get to it. I'm going to jump over to the other screen here. It's just my X feed. Go check me out over there. I'm at _Astral_. I'll put some links up here too. Let's see. The first one that caught my attention, again, it's all dropped at like 8 a.m. on Friday. So one of the first ones, I kind of dug right into the documents that were there. So I'm going through some of these documents and some of them caught my attention. I usually just scroll through pretty quickly and pick out some random pages right off of the bat. But this picture caught my attention, and then the corresponding a document as well where they were really talking about these green fireballs. So I start to pay attention when there's multiple witnesses, multiple cases of the same phenomenon and same events and objects happening. So this is a report where really it was about over 70 instances of these green fireballs were happening, and they were happening with trained observers. There's a colonel in there. There's also some military witnesses that were coming forward. So this is through multiple documents in this set. So that was one of the first things that caught my attention. And also I'm noticing that Eric Burleson and Luna, they're starting to highlight some of the cases on here. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Obviously, we should be looking into these more. But a lot of the stuff that they're highlighting are not videos at all. They're these cases that have been reported, and it seems like military and intelligence personnel are the ones reporting these cases as ones to pay attention to. So take that for whatever you take it as. All right, so first one, we'll go to a video here. This is one of the first videos. I worked a little bit backwards. I worked from the bottom in the back of the videos all my way going forward. So this was one of the first videos that I looked at that I thought was pretty interesting. I mean, I think initially off the bat, I immediately thought, oh, this looks like some birds. And that was one of the things that concerned me. It was when I first was looking through. So when I first was looking through the videos, and like I said, I worked from the back to the front. And so like 3 of the 4 first videos looked pretty convincing to be birds. And I'm like, oh no, like this isn't going to be good. So because you could hear up to the release politicians kind of managing. So Burleson and Burchett's like, yeah, you might find some birds and some balloons in there for sure, which I expected. But I think the first 3 or 4 videos that I was looking at, it was like, oh, this looks like some birds. But this was the first video where I saw it and I was like, okay, like this actually it looks like birds initially, but then you're like, oh man, this looks pretty interesting. So going back to it, you see that, this is the initial shot. And I'm like, oh, I don't know, man, this doesn't look like much. And then that flyby really quick happened. And I was like, oh man, that was so quick, the close up. But this to me was a very big close up of what this was. And as I slow it down, intentionally wanted to slow it down, you can see that like there's some form, there's some shape orbs in there. I don't know exactly what it is. I can't even pinpoint it, and it happened so quickly. But that was one of the first clips where I'm like, oh, okay, like this might not be exactly what, the prosaic explanation would be right off of the bat, and probably why it's still unexplained. And a lot of these cases are just unexplained. They're not saying they're aliens. They're not saying they're balloons or birds. They're just unexplained. They probably have a confidence level of what it is, I would imagine, because when Arrow comes out with their reports, they have a certain confidence level of what they can determine it to be. So some of these could have a confidence level that, they're pretty confident in what they're identifying here. All right, second one, I just thought it was very interesting to start off on such a detailed image right off of the bat here. And this one's kind of subtle. You can see like this streak right here. So I'll go back to that area right here. I should have slowed it down, but there's a streak that comes and like zips by. And so this is a pretty stable, and then it kind of follows it. So it zooms out and it zooms out to like, there's a ship again that was zoomed into, and it zooms out. So then you can see kind of the tail of the ship here, and it starts following this object that comes into the screen. So this object that zipped by comes into the screen, moves about, whether that's parallax, I don't know. It's tough to determine. It's tough to even determine how large it is based off of that. But I thought the right off of the bat, this was kind of a theme that came out too, is very detailed images in the beginning of boats and ships. And then it kind of got blurry. It got distorted, unfortunately, for when these objects come into the frame. So another frustration I think of people watching that is there's such clear images at different points of these videos, and then all of a sudden they're not very clear. This was one I thought was pretty interesting. There's some 2 orbs in the picture here. One speeds up, so there's different speeds. There's varying speeds here, which is interesting. And then they obviously start moving around. It's easier to tell the movement when there's two of them, and at some point they mirror each other. So, but again, the varying speeds was interesting here. And let me see here. I think at some point both go off screen. They're just kind of jumping around here. I think there's something at the end too. Yeah, they kind of zip away. But right in the beginning, I think was a very interesting part here where this one zips up to the other one. And they both see, you know, even if, I'm not sure Parallax could explain that, if they're both moving at different speeds. And there's these like tails that are always present in this when they're moving different directions. There's these tails that, you know, trail the object. I don't know exactly what that is, but again, the frustrating part is we're left to decide and figure this out, where it's not present or obvious at all that these are aliens or even craft. So, what exactly are we looking at? There's very little context for that. This was the first video that I saw that was in color. So there's not a lot of videos that are actually in color. And again, it just jumps right to black and white. So in the very beginning, I'm like, oh, okay, what's this? And then boop, jump to black and white. And doesn't really see like it's got a lock on the target. So it's blurry, you know, whether it's two objects or one, still not very clear there. But, you know, the object also kind of looks like it's pulsating in a way. But it's interesting enough. Look, there was a little string there, and again, just random zoom out. But actually, you could see right here, like, okay, there's a string there. Instantly thinking balloon. But again, this zoom out right here, like, what was this? Where is this? And it would have been nice to get some context on the object itself. But again, you see the string there at the end. You're kind of thinking balloon, but it's such a random video. This is probably one of my favorite videos, this one, which, you know, more detailed than usual. There was a lot of detail in this in terms of the landscape and the background. So I did another video, which I'll pull up in a second, where I zoomed in on this. I was just zooming in on my phone. I was like, all right, let me just get as close as I possibly can to figure out what this thing even looks like. And it looks actually like it's rotating. So it's rotating around. First initial prosaic thought is balloon. But, you know, the fact that they're tracking this thing for so long and that it's very clear, you know, it's just interesting to see with the different landscape. Now we've been told about HD footage. Okay, like this does not seem to me like it's HD footage that we're getting. Like, I'm not seeing the HD. This might have been taken in HD, but it's, you know, it's dissolved so much where it's not necessarily. This would be beautiful to get this in perfect HD, the closeness of this, how close it is to the object, but we just didn't get that. So while it is very interesting in the landscape behind it, makes it a little appealing. I think when people first watch it, again, it was similar to the last one, where there was like an orb or an object, a UFO flying in this wind farm. And so it's just a cool image to see, but conclusive, I don't know. All right, this one was an object that basically kind of disappears. You know, what it does or what that is still up in the air. There's a little orb over here on the right hand side, or UFO, whatever you want to call it. And then the object just sort of disappears. I thought that was an interesting part of it. You know, what exactly that does. Just kind of, it's a weird object too. It's a unusual shape that it looks like. So what that could be, flare, I don't know. It just is very unexplainable. This was an interesting video because obviously you're hearing it. If you've heard that was pretty loud, but this was a video where it's in full color. It's just to me, it's a random phone recording of something above an airport. And these guys are commenting on it. We're not really getting much context to it, but you know, what is that light? What could it have been? What's the report? What these guys were observing? It just looks sort of like a light in the sky that is pretty far away. It's tough to really gauge anything that's going on here, but again, these random videos are thrown in, and you're just kind of like left to fend for yourself on figuring out what it could be. But it also had sound, so I thought that was interesting, that just a video with sound. Here was one that got quite a bit of reaction. This was, right off the bat, looks like a balloon. And, a lot of people, including the former Aero director, Sean Kirkpatrick, are saying that this was a balloon. This was a Boy Scout balloon. This was one of the shoot downs. This was one of the, in terms of, I think it was Balloon Gate, where we were having balloons infiltrate the U.S. airspace. And this was one of the recordings from the shoot down, allegedly. But still, very interesting video. I could not figure out what was happening when I was first watching it. It looked like an explosion of some sort. But yeah, I think this really just looks very interesting right off of the bat initially when you're watching it. This was another one where, you have to kind of zoom in and look at the object. But if there was a video that showed, most of these are orbs and spheres and circles. This one is the first one that looks like a disc. It's kind of like barrel rolling. So right around like this part where it makes this turn, you could see it like flattens out a little bit. It flattens out and then it like banks and goes around, and then it locks on the object. So it's locking on this object right here. And so very interesting set of movements there. That's what made me pay attention to the video, where it kind of banks and it locks on, and then it's like wobbling. It's kind of like this wobble that happens with the movement. So very interesting to me on just, that video of what caught my attention. This was one of the videos that I noticed that was from Corbell's 8 videos that he shared on Sleeping Dog. This was like a Tic Tac object, the plane. I mean, look, when there's other objects in the field of view, and then you see the UAP, like a boat or, any kind of object like a car or plane along with the UAP, it's good for context to like get the idea for size and maybe even speed. So it looks like it's traveling at a quite, rapid pace. But again, like you don't know with parallax of what the angles are of what this is that's recording it. But I thought this was interesting. It's a Tic Tac type of shape going right by the plane. Another very, to me, interesting video. This was one of the more interesting videos that I saw. I liked this part right here in the beginning. This seems to, again, the recording parallax, I can't tell, but when it goes around here, it seems to make this like turn or change direction. And it's like a cigar shaped, Tic Tac cigar shaped craft, no wings on it. So going through there, and then it, this follows it. There's just, I don't know why that would be redacted right there too. Like there's some parts of these videos where, look, it's scrolling in. What could be redacted in this right half of the screen that they would have to take out completely? I don't know. But then it kind of weaves through, not weaves, but it's going through. You could see it zooms in. It's following the object, again, looking like a Tic Tac shape and just going about. But I thought this part in the very beginning was interesting, where you can see it's kind of a close-up capture of the object. So this was the case that Eric Burleson highlighted. Again, Eric Burleson was trying to point out some cases that he felt the public should be paying a little bit more attention to. And look, this story is incredible with what you were reading in this document, but really the main, beef in terms of what the importance is right in here with the experience that these guys had on a helicopter of an orb. Was it a fiery orb? It might have been, super hot orb, low to the ground, went towards them within 10 feet of the helicopter. Like 10 feet is like not even, it's like the back of my room. So that up close orb, and then splits off into two and accelerated out of sight. Like that is a spectacular story. Okay. And the unfortunate part is all we get is this photo of the object, and which was included in the last UFO files. So one of the things they're doing, it seems, is they're providing more information about cases which they may feel are important. So they had a group of photos from this event where these guys were describing, the orb that came up 10 feet. in front of their helicopter, split off into two, and raced off. So that one was an interesting one, and there only was 6 document drops that were files in the last one. So again, it was mainly the video files that were composed. This was a letter that I highlighted. It was written, it looks like there was a lot of activity in terms of like orbs and green lights. Again, the green lights, green fireballs over Los Alamos, so Los Alamos Laboratory. So this was a letter written to James Tuck, who was a scientist there. I didn't do too much background into this because, again, it just seems very random that to include something like this. And then they had another document that was just a memo about an organization that was studying UFOs or UAPs or looking at the science of it. So, a lot of these documents feel very scattered. There's not a lot of organization into them connecting to each other either. So, let's see what this one is. This is just my retweet. So I retweeted a couple of these. This is Sean Kirkpatrick saying he was confirming that the Lake Huron was the Boy Scout balloon. And this was my close-up that I took. So the close-up video of the spherical one that some people were saying was a rotating balloon, but again, can't determine it, I think, off of that. And I think it would have already been determined if it was too. So that's the one thing. And really, I had to post this the meme clip of really, that's just what it feels like. It feels like they're just dropping this, and debunkers, skeptics, video analysts are all just battling it out to try and figure out what these are. So it's been interesting to see. I think going forward, I wish there would be a little bit more direction, and maybe Arrow will provide some of their analysis at some point for some of these cases, so we could get some more data and evidence. One of the things that's interesting too, looking at the clips that Corbell has posted compared to the ones that the government, the Department of War has posted, was that Corbell's didn't redact his weren't redacted. They didn't redact all the sensor data. And that was a main priority, and I think a key for this information going out was that none of that information could be shared. So whoever's leaking these, without it could help provide context and information and to tell what these are. But, it's probably a very tricky situation. I saw Sleeping Dog, and he's got to be in an uncomfortable position to have all this footage, knowing that the government doesn't want this to be put out. But you still have to tote that line of what you're able to put out still without getting in trouble. So I don't know. So that's it for what I'm going to review today for the UFO Files. This is just a short, sweet episode. Wanted to just go through again. I'm just kind of working through some ideas, the show of the Astral Plane, what it would be, working with some other collaborators and some people in the field to develop it out and, get some advice along the way. I will be going to Contact, so I'll probably make a video at Contact with a lot of the people that I'll be hanging out with. Looking forward to it. Last year I had a blast. Not only just hanging out, did some stuff with the Psy Games. So we'll have a booth at the Psy Games. I think there's a couple of talks having to do with the Psy Games. I'll be there recording. Feel free to come up and say what's up and introduce yourself. And I had a fun time last year meeting a bunch of people that I've interacted with on Spaces. That was probably my favorite part of actually meeting a lot of the people that I've been talking to for the last couple of years about the UFO topic. So come say what's up. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to really kind of fleshing out a lot of these ideas that I have onto the channel and, interacting with everybody in the community. So thank you. Have a great one. Peace.